Firefighter Louis Caccioli told People Weekly, "I was taking firefighters up in the elevator to the 24th floor to get in position to evacuate workers. On the last trip up, a bomb went off. We think there were bombs set in the building." For more than a year, the Port Authority blocked the release of a tape of firefighters' transmissions from the World Trade Center on 9/11. In November 2002, the tape was finally released to the New York Times and other news outlets. Why did it take so long to get the tape released?
I got an eyewitness who said there was an explosion on floor 7-8. 7-8. We just had another explosion. Warren Street because of the secondary explosion. We've got numerous people covered with dust from the secondary explosion. And we got another explosion on the tower, 1013. 1013. Number 2 has had a major explosion and what appears to be a complete collapse surrounding the entire area. Who's involved in the secondary explosion at Tower 1K? I've got 5.
Chief Palmer had reached the fire on the 78th floor of the South Tower and devised a plan to put it out.
We got 2 isolated pockets of fire. We should be able to knock it down 2 lines. They know that. 78th floor, numerous 1045 call horns.
If the 78th floor was a raging inferno like the government would have us believe, then Palmer wouldn't have gotten as far as he did, and certainly wouldn't have been able to put it out. On August 12, 2005, an additional 15 hours of radio transmissions and transcripts of interviews with firefighters was finally released to the public. Firefighters described 2 events consistent with a controlled demolition: bright flashes from inside the building and a number of crackling sounds before the building's collapse. What does science have to say about the collapses? The collapse of the World Trade Center was picked up by Columbia University's observatory in Palisades, New York. The South Tower registered as a 2.1 earthquake. The North Tower registered as a 2.3 earthquake. Won Young Kim told 3.Bolum that their seismographs pick up underground explosions from a quarry 20 miles away. These blasts are caused by 80,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate and cause local earthquakes between magnitude 1 and 2. The 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center did not even register because it was not coupled to the ground. During the collapse, most of the energy of the falling debris was absorbed by the towers and the neighboring structures, converting them into rubble and dust or causing other damage, but not causing significant ground shaking. Mark Loiseau, the president of Controlled Demolition Incorporated, told the American Free Press that in the basements of the World Trade Center, where 47 central support columns connected to the bedrock, hot spots of literally molten steel were discovered more than a month after September 11th. These incredibly hot areas were found at the bottoms of the elevator shafts, down 7 basement levels. The molten steel was found 3, 4, and 5 weeks later when the rubble was being removed. He said that molten steel was also found at World Trade Center 7. The highest temperature was in the east corner of the South Tower, where a temperature of 1,377 degrees Fahrenheit was recorded. The molten steel in the basement was more than double that temperature. Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center? In all the videos of the collapses, explosions can be seen bursting from the building 20 to 30 stories below the demolition wave. Here, 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 and here. Etienne Sauret was filming her documentary, World Trade Center, the first 24 hours, and caught both collapses on tape. Watch carefully. The tripod shakes 12 seconds before the North Tower begins collapsing. And something is knocked off the right-hand side of the building. You're probably asking, if there were bombs in the building, how would they get in there without anyone noticing? Ben Fountain, a financial analyst who worked in the World Trade Center, told People magazine that in the weeks before 9/11, there were a number of unannounced and unusual drills where sections of both the Twin Towers and Building 7 were evacuated for security reasons. Daria Cord, a guard in the North Tower, told Newsday that security detail was working 12-hour shifts for 2 weeks before 9/11, but on Thursday the 6th, President Bush's brother, Marvin, was board of directors at Securicom from 1993 until fiscal year 2000. Securicom, now known as Stratosec, is an electronic security company backed by Kuwait American Corporation, which provided security for United Airlines, Dulles International Airport, and from the early 1990s up to the day of 9/11, the World Trade Center. Marvin is also the former director at HCC Insurance Holdings, which insured parts of the World Trade Center on 9/11. More information on this was supposed to be disclosed and never was. To date, the SEC has not revealed what they have learned. If only we could examine the debris from the World Trade Center and figure out what happened. Unfortunately, Mayor Giuliani began shipping the remains off to recycling yards overseas before investigators could even examine it. Not even FEMA was allowed into Ground Zero. Essentially, they blocked off a crime scene and destroyed all the evidence. Guess who was allowed into the site? Controlled Demolition, who was also responsible for cleaning up after the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. It gets better than that. On July 15, 2001, Controlled Demolition destroyed 2 400-foot-tall fuel reserve tanks from the World War II era. The demolition was conducted for no apparent reason and drew numerous complaints from the neighborhood. The site remains vacant to this day, and a reason for the demolition has never been disclosed. Regardless, I think what happened to the World Trade Center is simple enough. It was brought down in a carefully planned controlled demolition. It was a psychological attack on the American people, and it was pulled off with military precision. "10:06 a.m., Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Flight 93 was en route from New Jersey to California with 45 passengers when it went off course at 8:56 over Cleveland, Ohio. According to the official story, Flight 93 was headed for the White House when it was overpowered by a group of passengers and crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Out of all of the events of 9/11, the one that has caused the most confusion is Flight 93. It was shot down, it wasn't shot down. However, evidence suggests that perhaps Flight 93 was nowhere near Shanksville.
I want to get quickly to Chris Kanicki. He's a photographer with the Pittsburgh affiliate of Fox affiliate. He was back there just a couple of minutes ago, and Chris, I've seen the pictures. It looks like there's nothing there except for a hole in the ground.
Basically, that's right. The only thing you could see from where we were was a big gouge in the earth and some broken trees. We could see some people walking around in the area, but from where we could see, there wasn't much left.
Any large pieces of debris at all?
No, there was nothing that you could distinguish that a plane had crashed there.
Smoke, fire?
Nothing. It was absolutely quiet. It was actually very quiet. Nothing going on down there, no smoke, no fire. Just a couple of people walking around. They look like part of the NTSB crew walking around looking at the pieces.
How big would you say that hole was?
From my estimates, I would guess it was probably about 20 to 15 feet long and probably about 10 feet long or 10 feet wide.
What could you see on the ground, if anything, other than dirt and ash? And
you couldn't see anything. You could just see dirt, ash, and people walking around, broken trees.
Wally Miller, a Somerset County coroner,
told the Houston Chronicle, "It looked like somebody just dropped a bunch of metal out of the sky." In the Washington Post, "It looked like someone took a scrap truck, dug a 10-foot ditch, and dumped trash into it." And as for the passengers, I stopped being coroner after about 20 minutes because there were no bodies there. In the Pittsburgh Review, I have not, to this day, seen a single drop of blood. Not a drop. It would seem that, on one day, for the second time in history, an entire plane, along with its passengers, disappeared upon impact.
There are no signs of any survivors at the site of a Nigerian plane crash. That is the word from the Red Cross, which has a representative on site. The first pictures of the crash scene show a large crater with the Boeing 737 broken into small pieces. The plane crashed shortly after taking off from Lagos in a heavy storm. The flight was going to the Nigerian capital of Abuja and was believed to be carrying some senior Nigerian officials.
So if Flight 93 didn't go down in Shanksville, then where? You ready for this? Cleveland. At 11:43 on September 11th, WCPO, a local TV station in Cincinnati, Ohio, reported that 2 planes landed at Cleveland Hopkins Airport due to a bomb threat. United Airlines identified one of the planes as Flight 93. Are you confused? Well, it gets better. Check it out. At approximately 10 a.m., Cleveland Hopkins Airport was evacuated amidst rumors that a hijacked plane was going to land. Passengers had to leave, but couldn't drive. They had to walk or hitchhike. Buses weren't allowed to leave. People were sent home. According to Associated Press and local Ohio papers, one plane landed at approximately 10:45. But Delta Airlines confirmed that their plane, Delta 1989, landed in Cleveland at 10:10. Therefore, Flight 93 landed at Cleveland at approximately 10:45. Authorities searched Delta 1989 for over 2 hours, and passengers were questioned individually. The plane dealer reported that the plane was evacuated at 12:30. But the Akron Beacon reports that a plane was evacuated at 11:15, which would make that Flight 93. Mayor White reported that the plane had 200 passengers. But a passenger from Delta 1989 describes 60 or so passengers. So at 11:15, 200 or so passengers were released from Flight 93. The passenger from Delta 1989 states that she was taken into FAA headquarters. But other reports say that passengers were brought into the NASA Glenn Research Center, located near the west end of the airport, which had already been evacuated. So, to sum up, Delta 1989 landed at 10:10, was evacuated at 12:30, almost 2.5 hours later, and 69 passengers were taken to FAA headquarters. Flight 93 landed at 10:45 and evacuated within a half hour. 200 or so passengers quickly taken to an empty NASA Research Center. Why did it take 140 minutes to evacuate 69 passengers when 200 were evacuated in a half hour? We can assume that the passengers from Delta 1989 are safe somewhere. The question remains, what happened to the 200 or so passengers from Flight 93? It's interesting to note that the combined total of all the passengers from all 4 flights is 198, or 243, depending on who you ask. We may never know what really happened to Flight 93, but we do know what didn't happen. Whenever this evidence is presented to people, you'll usually get one of many different questions. The first one being, if different planes were used, what happened to the original ones? Unfortunately, we may never know what really happened. But if we could examine the black boxes from the planes that were used, we could prove that they weren't the original flights. A commercial plane carries 2 different black boxes. Each black box carries one of 2 different recorders, a cockpit voice recorder and a flight data recorder. The cockpit voice recorder records sounds from inside the cockpit, including engine noise, stall warnings, and other sounds of interest. Communications between air traffic control, weather briefings, and conversations between pilots and crew are also recorded. The flight data recorder records at least 28 different parameters such as time, altitude, speed, and heading. Some also record more than 300 other in-flight characteristics, anything from autopilot to smoke alarms. The recorders themselves are made from the most impervious metals known to man, and the information is recorded along with date and time, and spooled into a continuous roll. Any damage that is done to the roll is done to the outside, as opposed to the inside where the data is. The 9/11 Commission says that CVRs and FDRs from American 11 and United 175 were not found. Yet, the FBI claims to have found the passport of Saddam al-Sakami, which managed to fly out of his pocket, through the explosion, and onto the streets of Manhattan below. So, 4 different black boxes, made from the most resilient materials known to man, were destroyed. Yet, a passport, made from a fragile material known as paper, managed to survive? Who writes this stuff? Ted Lepatkowitz, spokesman for the National Transportation Safety Board, told CBS News that it's extremely rare that we don't get the recorders back. I can't recall another domestic case in which we did not recover the recorders. Turns out Ted's right. Nicholas DeMasi, a firefighter who helped the recovery efforts, claims in the book, Behind the Scenes, Ground Zero, "At one point, I was assigned to take federal agents around the site to search for the black boxes from the planes. There were a total of 4 black boxes. We found 3. I guess it all comes down to who you'd rather believe." FBI Director Robert Mueller said Flight 77's data recorder provided altitude, speed, headings, and other information, but the voice recorder contained nothing useful. And Donald Rumsfeld said the data on the cockpit voice recorder was unrecoverable. As for Flight 93, it was the only flight where the cockpit voice recorder was recovered. It was played for the families in April 2002, but not before they signed an agreement saying that they wouldn't talk about it. They couldn't even take notes. And for some reason, the last 3 minutes of the tape was unaccounted for. The FBI had no explanation for the discrepancy. Why would the 9/11 Commission tell us Flight 11 and 175's recorders weren't found? Why would Robert Mueller tell us that there's nothing interesting on Flight 77's? What's on the last 3 minutes of Flight 93's cockpit voice recorder? These are vital questions that need to be answered. It's an interesting postscript that Flight 93 was spotted on April 10, 2003 at Chicago's O'Hare Airport by David Friedman, a United Airlines employee who records all of his flights. The tail number, N591UA, was spotted on Flight 1111, a United Airlines 757. And according to the FAA, both N591UA and N612UA, Flights 93 and 175, are still valid. But Flights 11 and 77 are listed as destroyed. Not to mention that they were not even scheduled to fly on September 11th.
Next, what about the cell phone calls? For starters, the calls themselves are extremely peculiar. Most of them are only a couple sentences long before the callers end the conversation, only to call back later. Flight attendant Betty Ong allegedly placed a call from Flight 11. According to the 9/11 Commission, although the conversation lasted 23 minutes, only 4.5 minutes was recorded.
What is your name?
Okay, my name is Betty Ong. I'm number 3 on Flight 11.
Okay.
And the cockpit is not answering their phone. And there's somebody stabbed in business class, and we can't breathe in business class. Somebody's got mace or something. Okay. Our number 1 got stabbed. Our purser is stabbed. Nobody knows who stabbed who, and we can't even get up to business class right now because nobody can breathe. Our number 1 is stabbed right now.
Okay.
And our number 5, our first class passengers, our first class galley flight attendant, and our purser has been stabbed. And we can't get up to the cockpit. The door won't open.
Does Miss Ong sound like a woman on a hijacked plane who just saw 3 people murdered? Why is nobody in the background screaming? Flight attendant Madeline Sweeney allegedly talked to the ground manager Michael Woodward for 25 minutes. She describes 4 hijackers. The FBI says there were 5. She says the hijackers were in rows 9 and 10. The FAA says they were all in row 8. Near the end, she screams, "I see buildings. Water. Oh my God!" Madeline was a flight attendant out of Boston for 12 years. I think she would have recognized Manhattan. A man claiming to be Mark Bingham called his mother Alice, who was visiting his sister-in-law. The caller says, "Mom, this is Mark Bingham. When was the last time you called your mother and used your full name? I just want to tell you that I love you. I'm on a flight from Newark to San Francisco, and there are 3 guys on board, and they say they've taken over the plane, and they say they have a bomb. I'm calling you from the airphone." And then, "You believe me, don't you, Mom?" "Yes, Mark, I believe you. Who are these guys?" Then he was interrupted by someone who was speaking in a low-toned male voice, speaking what sounded like English. After 30 seconds of muffled sounds, the caller repeats, "I'm calling you with an airphone." His mother asks him again, "Who are these guys?" After another pause, he returns and asks again, "You believe me, don't you, Mom?" There was another pause, and the phone just trailed off. To date, none of these calls, except for Betty Ong's call to American Airlines, has been released to the public. But to be honest, none of that matters. Why? Because none of these calls could have taken place. Key Dudney of Physics911.net conducted some research of his own. In an experiment called Project Achilles, cell phones onto a Cessna 172 and flew up to 8,000 feet to determine the success rate as the plane got higher. At 4,000 feet, he had a 0.4 success rate. At 8,000 feet, he had a 0.1 success rate. For 32,000 feet, cruising altitude for a commercial airliner, he calculated a 0.006 success rate, less than 1 in 100th of a chance. Don't believe me? Even American Airlines has put their foot in the government's mouth. On July 15, 2004, passengers aboard a commercial American Airlines flight were able to send and receive calls from their cell phones as if they were on the ground, thanks to a cell station that was installed into the plane. It worked great. I called the office, I called my wife, I called a friend in Paris. They all heard me great, and I could hear them loud and clear. Why would American Airlines spend thousands of dollars on this technology in 2004 when it wasn't possible to fake a person's voice? In 1999, the Los Alamos Laboratory in New Mexico revealed their voice morphing technology. General Carl W. Steiner, the former Commander-in-Chief of United States Special Operations, declared on tape, "Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government." Another example was Colin Powell, saying, "I am being treated well by my captors." With just a 10-minute recording of somebody's voice, they are able, in almost real time, to clone someone's speech. Steiner was so impressed, he asked for a copy. So what about the hijackers? On September 14, 2001, the Department of Justice released the names of the alleged 19 hijackers. But on September 23rd, the BBC reported that Walid al-Shari was alive and well in Casablanca, Morocco. They also tracked down Abdulaziz al-Amari, who was an engineer with Saudi Telecom and lost his passport while studying in Denver. In the same article, FBI Director Robert Mueller admitted that the identity of several of the hijackers is in doubt. So how many hijackers turned up alive? At least 9 of them. Wael al-Shari is alive and well. Mohand al-Shari is alive in Saudi Arabia. Khaled al-Midar is a computer programmer in Mecca. Salem al-Hazmi works at a chemical plant in Yanbu, Saudi Arabia. Saeed al-Ghamdi is training to be a pilot in Tunis. Ahmed al-Nami is an administrative supervisor for Saudi Airlines. We already covered Walid and Abdulaziz. And last but not least, Mohammed Atta's father claimed to receive a phone call from his son on September 12th. On September 20th and 27th, Mueller admitted on CNN that there is no legal proof to prove the identities of the hijackers. Indeed, after all, not even the official autopsy for Flight 77 lists the hijackers. And the opening paragraph makes no mention of their absence. So, if there's no proof that the hijackers were members of Al-Qaeda, or if they were even on the plane in the first place, what justification do we have for bombing Afghanistan? Oh, that's right. The Bin Laden confession tape. On December 14, 2001, the government released a tape, allegedly of Bin Laden confessing to the attacks of September 11th, which they claimed to find in a house in Jalalabad, Afghanistan. Except there's a number of things wrong with this tape. 1. The tape itself is of very poor quality. And 2. The man in the video looks and acts nothing like Bin Laden. FBI's website, Osama is left-handed. Yet, in this video, he's writing a note with his right hand. Not to mention he's wearing a gold ring, which is forbidden by Islamic law, and is never mentioned in the FBI's description of him. Compare this video to 4 other pictures of bin Laden. Does anybody else see a problem here? Until the government can prove without a shadow of a doubt that Al-Qaeda was behind September 11th, the American people have every reason to believe otherwise. And now for the last question of all. Why would our government do such a thing? I hope you're sitting down. First, we have Larry Silverstein, the man who purchased the World Trade Center in July 2001. After September 11th, Silverstein demanded $7.2 billion from his insurers, claiming that each plane counted as a separate act of terrorism. However, on December 6th, 2004, the courts only reward him with $2.2 billion. Next, we have the put options that were placed on United Airlines, American Airlines, and Boeing. According to the San Francisco Chronicle, more than $2.5 million has remained unclaimed. As for 9/11 itself, Reuters reported that Convar, a German computer company, is responsible for helping companies and accountants in New York restore their data from over 400 hard drives that were recovered from the World Trade Center's rubble. Convar recovered information from 32 different computers that suggested insider trading took place on 9/11. Richard Wagner, an expert at Convar. There is a suspicion that some people had advanced knowledge of the approximate time of the plane crashes in order to move out amounts exceeding $100 million. They thought that the records of their transactions could not be traced after the mainframes were destroyed. After their analysis, Convar handed the results over to the FBI. Although the FBI was legally bound to responsible, to date they have done no such thing. According to Wikipedia, one of the world's largest gold depositories was stored underneath the World Trade Center. In 1993, the value of the gold was estimated at $1 billion, rumored to be owned by Kuwaiti interests. When the World Trade Center was destroyed, the amount of gold far exceeded the 1993 levels. The gold was finally recovered in its entirety in late 2001. Or was it? On November 1st, 2001, the Times Online reported that a large amount of gold was discovered in the wreckage of the World Trade Center. Mayor Rudolph Giuliani announced that more than $230 million was recovered from Ground Zero. However, the COMEX Metals Trading Division was storing gold bars for the Bank of Nova Scotia, Chase Manhattan Bank, Bank of New York, Hong Kong, and Shanghai Banking, totaling $950 million. And that's just one company. Rumor has it that over $160 billion in gold was stored in the World Trade Center. So where did all the gold go? Remember the gold that was found in November 2001? Reuters reported that it was discovered in the back of a 10-wheel truck, along with several cars, in a delivery tunnel underneath World Trade Center 5. No bodies were recovered. As workers got closer to the gold, authorities began restricting access to Ground Zero, joined by FBI and Secret Service agents. One worker, who was directed away from the tunnel, told a reporter, "If I tried to go down there, they would have shot me." Heavy machinery operators and others worked under the watchful eye of more than 100 armed officers. So let me get this straight. Gold from World Trade Center 4 was found underneath World Trade Center 5 in an empty delivery truck with an empty escort of cars. I think it's safe to say that they were running away from the South Tower. The question is, how did they know to flee from their staff when not even the firefighters inside the South Tower expected it to collapse? $7 billion in gold. $200 million is found. And that's just the money. After September 11th, President Bush had and continues to have permission to do and say whatever he wants, all under the pretext of 9/11. The Patriot Act, the Department of Homeland Security,
Afghanistan, Iraq.
Good. Second one. Hit the other one.
It's time for America to accept 9/11 for what it was. A lie which killed thousands of people, only in turn killing hundreds of thousands more to make billions upon trillions of dollars. Are you angry yet? You should be. Every single attempt to investigate and uncover the truth behind 9/11 has been blackballed, ridiculed, and harassed by both the government and media alike for even daring to question the official story.
Jimmy Walter, who spent nearly $2 million on an advertising blitz to convince people here in New York and elsewhere that 9/11 was a self-inflicted wound. Jimmy, welcome. Why are you doing this?
I'm a patriot trying to defend this country from the real terrorists who have damaged and changed our country. I am asking the same questions that the widows and orphans, parents and friends of the victims of 9/11 are asking and have not had answered by either the 9/11 Commission nor by any real investigation to the mass murders that 66% of New Yorkers want investigated.
Okay, Jimmy.
I'll say it again. Why are they hiding from us? What are they hiding from us? And what's it going to take until people in this country give a damn and do something about it? America has been hijacked. Not by Al-Qaeda, not by Osama bin Laden, but by a group of tyrants ready and willing to do whatever it takes to keep their stranglehold on this country. So what are we going to do about it? Anything. Share this information with friends, family, total strangers, hold screenings, conferences, whatever you have to do to get the word out. It's up to you. Ask questions. Demand answers.